and you're making sure the tax code is working in your favor. Because let's face it, there's a lot of challenges out there. We have a turbulent economy. Some people are saying they don't know what's going to happen in the next year or so. But I know that I have control over what that I can do for myself. And that's why we're here. And there's other people out there that, they don't understand that there is that control available if you only understand how entities can work for you and what they can do when it comes to planning. And it's our goal today to make sure that you learn about this. And we're going to do our best to ensure that at the end of this presentation, you're going to walk out of here and you're going to be in a new realm. You're going to be opened up to the ideas of how business entities can put you in a different position. I know there's a lot of naysayers out there that will tell you, oh, just get extra insurance. Don't worry about that. It's too complicated. Well, I'm going to show you that information, those individuals who think that way, is that they're missing out on what entities can do. And they're putting sometimes individuals in places where, unfortunately, something bad does happen in their life. The protection or that they thought they had by just loading up on insurance isn't necessarily going to be there. And so we're going to go through that. But before we get started, I do want to go through some basics about the event. If you didn't catch the opening here, because I know a lot of people were still joining us as we went through that opening video. So I'll just give you a recap of what it is. It just takes a minute for my iPad to come up here. So today, what we're going to do, the class will run from 9 a.m. this morning to about 4 p.m. this afternoon. And we plan to take breaks. Every hour we'll provide you a 10-minute break. So you got to get up, get a fresh cup of coffee, something like that. Don't worry, we'll shoot for breaks every 60 to 75 minutes or so. We'll be giving you a 10-minute break. We'll take a lunch break, probably around 1 o'clock. Maybe I run a little long, might be 1:15, but we will shoot for that time, again, Pacific time, to give you a 30-minute lunch break. Now, in addition to that, the event itself, as you heard on the opening, if you were here, what I think is so unique about this is not only are you going to become an informed investor, you're an informed business owner by taking in this information, but you also have the opportunity to take the material that we're going to be covering, myself and my partner, Toby Mathis, and the strategies that we're sharing with you. And you're going to be able to take that and apply it to your individualized situation. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that we have a team of professionals here with us today that are monitoring the Q&A. And in the Q&A, what they're going to be doing is answering your specific questions. Because the material that I'm going to be covering and Toby's going to be talking about, keep in mind that it's general. That is, I'm talking about LLCs and statutory trusts and land trusts and how they work when it comes to protecting your assets. And Toby's going to be going through tax strategies and real estate professional status and things like that. But everyone is different. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And this is, I've seen, the problem, the trap that many people that are not here with us today, that are out there and they're struggling, trying to figure out asset protection. They're looking on the internet and they're getting advice. They find out that, somebody says, just set up this entity or just do this because everyone does it. And they don't realize that when you're talking about investing, you're talking about business, you really want to look at what strategies are going to work best for you in your situation. You want to make sure that you have strategies that work not only for you in your situation, but where you're doing in your investing. Because as you're going to discover, where you invest will also change the types of entities we use. How you invest will change the types of tax structures we use for growing our business and growing our investing. So all of this comes back to you as an individual. And that's why we're bringing these professionals here today, is to make sure you get your questions answered. So by taking the time out, you're going to come away from this event with strategies that are, you can put into action and you can apply to increase your wealth and move your investing forward. So use the Q&A. That's what it's designed for. The chat, well, the chat box, as they stated, that's if you have technical difficulties. If you want to reach out to us, maybe you're a platinum client already or a titanium client. You're just saying, hey, I've been with Anderson and I have some questions about my account, or you need to discuss with us something one-on-one. Definitely use the chat for that. But the Q&A is to get your questions answered. We're going to have a special offer for you for taking the time out to be here with us today. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's our way of giving back and saying, I know you got a busy busy life, and it is a sacrifice to be here. And so we're going to reward you for making that sacrifice to share this event with us today. Now, I do want to know this, and this is your opportunity. Put this into the chat, not the Q&A. I want to know where you're from, because I think it makes the event more interesting when we know where people are joining us from. It also allows us then to customize the information. I see here I have already some people from Seattle, Phoenix. So we got Arizona, another Seattle, California, more California, Texas, all right, Ohio, Louisiana, all right, we're coming in all over Florida, California, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all right, the unique strategies for Pennsylvania, Tennessee just popped up. We have unique strategies for Tennessee as well we need to be aware of. Florida has unique one. Russia, all right, that's a first. I have not seen that before. Florida, Texas, a lot on the coast today for this event. That's interesting. You here, we got Mississippi. There's another person from Russia. Man, I don't know what our marketing's doing to bring in people from Russia, but great. Welcome. Glad you're here. Colorado, New York, San Francisco Bay Area, Guam. Wow, we've got quite the reach. And that's important because it doesn't matter where you're currently residing. If you're looking at investing in the United States and you're trying to protect your real estate, this is where you want to be. You want to be on with Toby and myself, learning about the strategies and what it takes. Venezuela, Alaska. Well, that Alaska is basically like a foreign country as well. It's so far up there. Beautiful place, though. Grand Cayman Island. All right. Wow, Toby, this is amazing. We got some people from different areas here. Connecticut. All right. New York, Portugal. I was just in Portugal a while ago. Beautiful country. Really enjoyed my time in Lisbon and Porto. Not to mention there's fabulous food there, exceptionally good wines as well. Maryland. All right. So we've got people coming from all over. This is excellent. It really, as I stated, the reason I want to know this, Minnesota, I just saw there. The reason we ask these questions is because when we're talking about planning, we're going to be looking at putting together, as I stated earlier, certain structures for certain types of investments, where those investments are located. And so the more people I see from certain areas, it's going to help me in my presentation, because I'll make sure that we're going to touch on as many different areas as we can so that you get a good idea of what you should be doing with your investing. All right. Now, a little bit about Andersen, if you're not familiar with us. We began this journey, Toby and I did, when we formed the firm back in '99. And we did it with this in mind, that we wanted to help people protect their assets. And so we created a firm with the focus of working with individuals just like yourselves to put together plans that will ensure if they ever ran into issues with your investing, with their business, just life in general, that all of those efforts that they've put forth to create what they have today would not be put in jeopardy, that we would minimize the overall risk that's involved. And that has been our goal at Andersen, is to ensure that people's assets are protected. And the strategies we use, of course, are the same strategies that Toby and I use for our own asset protection and those of thousands upon thousands of individuals that we've helped over our careers in building up this company. And it started with humble beginnings. We started out with a few employees, and now we've grown the firm to 500 employees with offices in multiple states. And that growth has been driven by the understanding that there is a need out there for this type of planning, that there are individuals who would like nothing better than to take you and break your success down and use it to put into their pockets, because they bring frivolous claims against individuals and they shake them down. They look for opportunities to go after people when they're most vulnerable. I recall a recent Wall Street Journal article I was reading about zombie mortgages, where a gentleman in Georgia had a house and he had this mortgage that he thought was written off. And now, what has it been? 10 years later, this creditor's coming back against him and essentially forcing him into bankruptcy, is what he said. And the interesting part, and it's sad too, that here's a gentleman, he's been in this house since 99, I believe it was, or 98, he bought this property, and now he's potentially going to be forced out of it, or he's forced into bankruptcy. Had he taken a few steps, had he been here on one of these events years ago and learned some of the strategies that we're going to be sharing with you today, I think it would have been a different outcome, because the people who are coming after him that bought this debt that he thought was written off by the bank several years ago, he thought I think it's been 8 or 10 years, he thought it was written off. They're coming after him. And the reason why they're pursuing him is because, as they stated in the letter to him, he has equity in his house. And so they know that they can get paid. And that's why they're not willing to settle this away. And the gentleman said, he says, I understand this was a debt that I took out and I thought it was written off. It's not. And I'm willing to work with them to be fair, but they're not willing to because they have dollar signs in their sights and they see this equity. Well, there's a simple strategy he could have implemented, something that we teach all the time about how to make that equity disappear. And he could have changed that narrative. And that's been our goal here at Anderson, is to help people like this gentleman, to put them in a better position so things like that can impact them. Not only do we focus on asset protection, we also have a tax planning side to our firm as well, where we work with individuals to reduce their taxes, to make sure that not only are they taking advantage of everything under the tax code, but at the same time, they're doing things in a way which will help them grow their business. That is, many people that are out there that work in this space don't understand that there's multiple aspects to creating a business. And if you set it up in a certain way, you can really do more with your entities. And we've seen that personally. And here at Anderson, we focus on that, is that we believe, our ethos is that in using entities, they're going to help you do more with your business, with your investing, protecting your assets, and understanding the nature of that entity and how it's set up can really propel whatever it is you're doing in life. And you're going to see that as we go through that. So we've got a lot here as far as Anderson has to offer. We have tremendous professionals inside of the firm, attorneys and CPAs that work hand in hand with our clients to help them with their business planning, with their asset protection planning. A little bit about myself before I go into the services that Anderson provides. By myself, I'm a real estate investor. I come from a real estate investor family. And I learned a lot over the years. And, it's been a tremendous journey for myself to be part of Anderson and working in this space, is because over those years, what I've learned in my own investing, Toby and I, we invest together. We've built a sizable portfolio for ourselves, well over 300 properties in multiple asset classes. And when we first started out, I'll admit there were challenges involved in that we didn't understand necessarily what it means to build a portfolio the way we have, and that we were using entities in certain ways and making tax elections. And I'm going to be sharing all of this with you guys so that you understand what not to do, because we've already done that years ago. That we were holding ourselves back in our planning, that we didn't quite get what it is. And slowly over time, we started to really start fine tuning it and building it. And so we've built this portfolio up of real estate investments, and those strategies that we use to build our portfolio, we've taken those same strategies here at Anderson. We've helped thousands of people do the exact same thing. And sometimes you think it's innate. And as I said, I grew up in a real estate investing family. My father was an avid real estate investor. And it wasn't until I graduated from law school and I started practicing, I was 5 years into practicing, that I was able to go back to him and even explain to him, hey, we can do more here, Dad. If we restructure you and we do this and we take these things here, these are going to be the benefits just with your own real estate. And so it's been part of my life growing up to this point is real estate. I've seen what it can do for people. And then just being an attorney and taking that with the knowledge of being an attorney and putting those two together has really not only helped ourselves, but we've helped, as I stated, thousands upon other individuals do the exact same thing. And that's what we want to do for you here today. Now, I want to bring on Toby. He's going to be talking this afternoon. He's going to be blowing you away about tax planning, but I want to bring him on. Toby, come on and tell them what they're going to be hearing this afternoon. And why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Coons.
Hey.
Good day to you, sir. And you're doing a great job. And I know that people are really chomping at the bit to learn all about land trusts, LLCs, corporations, how all the entities work. But you got to understand one thing that's really unique about real estate. It's a tax savings gold mine. It really does become kind of an optional thing for you if you want to eliminate your tax, this is the realm where you can actually do it. Now, Clint's going to be talking about, we called it four-legged stool. I'm sure he's going to go over that a lot today. But you balance that against your business planning and whether you're going to grow your portfolio. And I'm sure he'll share some of our experiences, because it's really great when you don't pay tax, but the lenders always look at you with a raised eyebrow, right? But it is an option for you because there's some really cool incentives built into the code. And we're going to go over those this afternoon. At Anderson, we've helped thousands of people save millions of dollars because we put our CPAs, EAs, bookkeepers, attorneys, everybody under one roof. So we look at it and we're looking at it holistically for you, not just asset protection, but how do you keep more money in your pocket? And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to go over 1031 exchanges. We're going to go over this thing called bonus depreciation, accelerated depreciation, cost segregations, what a dealer's treated as, what a wholesaler's treated as, why are they different, how you could be a real estate professional, how you can write things off that you had no idea you could write off, including things you're already spending money on. And we can convert them into deductions simply by structuring you appropriately. And there is nothing better than real estate as far as investments is concerned for getting you those gold nuggets. So I'm going to go over that this afternoon. Plus, we're going to talk about creating a legacy, because if you build up a cash flow money-making machine, you don't want to just give it to Uncle Sam when you're gone. You don't want your kids just to sell it and be done with it. You want it to continue to benefit future generations. And I said that with an S because I actually mean it. It's not just a die and distribute idea here. You have a lot of different options when you go down this planning hole. You're going into this area and you're saying, hey, if I decide that I am going to actually structure myself appropriately and get these benefits, how do you pass them on in a loving way so that they continue to benefit your future generations? We'll show you how to do that too. It's going to be a lot of fun. I always get a little strapped for time because Mr. Coons there does a really good job. Make sure he answers everybody's questions, which, by the way, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different attorneys on right now answering questions. If you have questions, go into that Q&A and ask them. We're all there. I'll be there all afternoon, all day answering questions. But we will have a ton of fun making sure that you keep more of what you earn in your pocket and then pass it on in a loving way this afternoon.
Hey, Toby, we've already done 84 questions and we're only 20 minutes into this.
I am well aware. Some people just come in loaded. They just get like, I've got 3 things, and then they just put it all out there. Yeah. Don't worry, guys. The event is designed to both answer your questions and help you create more, right? So we're here to answer them as you go along so that you're not lost in the woods. And by the way, I'll just say this one thing. If you're going to work with professionals that do what you do. If you're in real estate, try to work with people the best you can. Work with people that do real estate because there's nuances. And I'm telling you, the tax code is over 10,000 pages with millions of pages of interpretation, regulations, case law. There's stuff changing all the time. If you're not in it, it's hard to keep up on it. And so if you go to your regular old accountant, they're just going to use the old fashioned, hey, 27.5-year depreciation. They don't know how to retire an asset. They don't know how to accelerate that. They don't know what a cost seg is. And they certainly don't know the difference between a dealer, house hacker, a wholesaler, and a regular investor. So you're running into trouble just by them not having that knowledge. And the only way they're going to pick it up is by doing it. So please work with people who do what you are doing. I'll leave it at that, bud.
All right. Thanks. See you in a bit. Okay. So about Anderson Services, what we do here as a firm is that, as you can probably appreciate, we do set up entities. We're going to be learning about this. I'm going to show you how to effectively use limited liability companies. It's something we set up, how to effectively use series LLCs, land trusts, corporations. So all nature of business entities, that is part of our services. And that's what we founded the firm on. But then as we started working in clients and going out there and having discussions and strategy sessions with people, we realized there was a real problem that people kept bringing up. Hey, it's great you're talking about entities, but my CPA or my tax professional just doesn't get it. They don't understand why we're doing X and Y with our overall planning. So at Anderson, we realized this was a real problem. Our clients kept asking us, can you provide tax services? So what Toby did is he actually built out a tax department back in 2004. And then we started providing tax and bookkeeping services for our clients. Because as Toby stated, we're bringing together both the tax and the legal side. And so this is what you get when you're working with Anderson is you're experiencing individuals or working with individuals who are looking at it from a multifaceted approach to make sure that what you're creating is fully optimized. Because if it is optimized, and there's a lot of plans out there I've seen that are not optimized, and I'll be talking about that here in just a minute when we talk about the four-legged stools Toby mentioned and how that works. And so here at Andersen, our clients work with a team of professionals that work on both sides. And then we also have retirement planning services. So if you're considering investing with your IRA and you want to, or maybe just you want to put money aside. I was talking to someone not too long ago and we were talking about retirement planning, and he wanted to set up a Roth, and he told me that he'd heard he could put, $6,000, a little over $6,000 a year into his Roth IRA. And I said, yeah, you could do that. But how about if I showed you a strategy where you could put $61,000 a year inside of your Roth? Would you be interested? Now, ask yourself, I can sure if I said to you, hey, or how many of you are interested in putting $61,000 a year into a Roth so that the income generated from that is going to be completely tax-free to you and your heirs? I could say, hey, that sounds pretty cool. There's ways to do that. And a lot of times people say, well, why hasn't anybody else told me this? Well, the reason why is because you got a lot of people out there that aren't taking the time out to absorb this type of information, to learn about these things, so that when the opportunity comes along and you're ready to take action, you can do that. You know that there are solutions out there to some of the challenges that you face. Retirement planning for many individuals is one of those. And then the most important aspect of everything we do here at Andersen is what I refer to as the business strategy planning. And that we really get down and we look at someone's business and we analyze it to find out what can we do for them to make sure that this is going to help them move their investing, move their business forward, so they're maximizing everything they can out of it. And let me just start with explaining what that means, because this really is going to typify what you're going to be learning from me today. Is that I'm going to show you what, Toby said four-legged. I'm going to talk about just the three legs of the stool for now, and I'll show you the fourth leg later. But your business needs to be built, or your investing needs to be built on a solid foundation, and a foundation that can really help you. So that foundation of this stool is, number one, it's asset protection, okay? To make sure that whatever we're building up here is going to be protected from creditors, and I'm going to be protected from anything that goes wrong with my business. But what goes hand in hand with that? Tax planning. Tax planning is important as well. Why set up an entity if it's not optimized to ensure that you're getting every possible tax benefit? We're going to show you today how you can buy real estate. You can maybe you invest $200,000 in a piece of property, and immediately you can get back every dollar you put in to buy that property. So if your down payment was 20%, we're going to show you a strategy where that money will all come back to you through the tax code. Just by using the tax code, you can get back that down payment, because if you set up the entity the right way, you make the right elections, that can then create massive tax deductions for you. So tax planning, extremely important. But there's also another side to this, and that is called business planning. And that's what I mean by what we focus here on at Andersen, is that we're looking at these two legs, but we're also focusing on the third leg. And a lot of professionals out there, other people who are investing right now, starting businesses, many times what happens is they start working with people who only look at one leg of this stool. Maybe they've got an attorney and they're focusing on the asset protection side. Great. You've got the asset protection, but then you're giving up the tax planning side, and you're not maximizing your business potential with what it is you're doing. Or maybe they're working with a CPA who just focuses on taxes, and then a lawsuit develops. And then everything they've worked on, yeah, they reap some great tax benefits, but it's all taken away by one lawsuit. So we want to build a foundation that's supported adequately by these three legs. Because one leg, as you can probably imagine, it's really tough to keep that stool up, standing upright. Two legs, even, you a little bit better, but three legs, that's why they make three-legged stools, is so that you have that support. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, a while ago, I was speaking with someone. The CPA reached out to me from California, and he said he wanted to talk to me about some structuring. So it turns out that we had quite a few clients that were utilizing this CPA. Unbeknownst to us, they weren't using our tax services. They were using this other CPA, and he happened to be in California. And they were all California clients, because we work nationwide. We create structures for people in all 50 states and even in other countries. As you know, there are people here from other countries today. I listed off 5 of them that are joining us today. We help those individuals set up their businesses here in the US. So these individuals that were working with a CPA who wanted to speak with me, the reason why he set up this call is that he was concerned about what he was seeing on their tax returns. And I said, interesting, what is your concern? He said, well, I noticed that for a lot of these individuals, you create a C corporation for their business. And I said, okay, so what's your concern about that? And he said, well, C corporations, they're not appropriate for most individuals, and you should not be setting those up. I like to use S corporations or LLCs that are passed through to the client, because you're really putting people in a position by using a C corporation where they can't maximize the tax benefits that come from starting up a new business. And I see this as a problem that your firm is perpetuating. And it's like, okay, so you're saying we don't know what we're doing. That's always a great way to start a conversation. He was trying to be nice about it, but that is exactly what he was saying. So I said, well, can you give me some examples? And he said, oh yeah, I just spoke to someone the other day, and he told me his name. And so I pulled them up in our system. And so I knew exactly what's going on with this client. He said, this person had started a new business, and let's just say it was a delivery business, all right? He said, you recommended that they create a C corporation. You established a C corporation for this individual. And he said, in my experience, this is the CPA talking to me. He said, in my experience, when people start new businesses, typically they're going to lose money, all right, in the first year or maybe the first 2 years. And so the better strategy would have been for this person to set up what he said was an LLC. This is an LLC that's disregarded down to this person. And the reason why he wanted to do that, he stated, is so that the anticipated loss, which he'd already done some calculations, he said they're going to lose $20,000 this year in this business. The loss will flow down to that person. Now they'll be able to take this loss on their 1040 Schedule C and offset it against his spouse's income of $100,000. So when you start a business and you're out there, you're conducting business, if you have a loss from your active business, you can use it to offset all forms of income that you're making. Okay, so it flows on to your Schedule C. So these are great losses to have. I mean, no loss is great, I guess, but if you're going to have a loss, Schedule C loss is pretty good, because what'll happen is you'll take that loss up here, and then for tax purposes, you're only going to get taxed on $80K. And that was his point. He said, what you're doing when the C corporation is you're locking that loss into the C corp, and I can't use it then to offset their income this year. And so I have a problem with that, because that loss to them, that $20,000 loss that they should be taking, is worth about $4,000. So you're costing the client $4K with your planning. I'm like, okay, I hear you. But I want to ask you this. What is that client looking to do? And he said, what do you mean? What is he looking to do? I said, well, what are they doing? I mean, you're focused on their business, but what are they doing beyond their business? Okay, if you ask those questions, where they want to go in life and what their goals are, I got silence from him. And, he's talked about then he kind of rolled back into the business. I said, that's not really what this is about here, this type of planning, what we're looking at. You see, this person told us when we started working with them, okay, that they want to invest in real estate, that's what they want to do. They want to build passive income. So if that's the goal, which we ask that of our clients when we start working with people, what do you want to achieve? And if we understand where you want to go, then we're going to help develop a plan so you can get there. A lot of people out there like this CPA, they look at the here and now and not tomorrow. And we're focused on tomorrow and what is the most efficient way for you to reach that position in life. And I said to this individual, the CPA, I said, this person wants to invest in real estate. In order to buy houses, we want to make sure here at Anderson that they can go out there and get their first investment property, and we're not going to run into problems along the way. And so in buying real estate, when you're going to finance it, which that's what they said they were going to do, they weren't buying for cash. And what I'm talking about here is these are the types of questions we need to be asking ourselves, all right? Your professional that you work with should be asking these types of questions of you. What do you want to do? How are you going to finance your real estate? Where do you want to buy? What are you currently doing on the business side? How do you make your money? Because all of that is important in determining what type of structure you should be creating. So the CPA didn't understand this. They said they want to buy real estate. So knowing they want to buy real estate, how do I set up a plan that's going to help them achieve that? Well, if we went with your route to save them $4,000, when they go in to apply for a loan, what does a lender ask to look to see? Copies of their 1040. So now this individual with whom you're recommending they do not use a C corporation, use an LLC that's disregarded, will turn over a tax return to a lender that shows they only make $80,000 a year because that is their taxable income. Plus they have a business that's losing $20,000 a year. Do you think as an underwriter, if I'm looking at a borrower, if I see that on their tax return, I'm going to feel encouraged that they're in a strong financial position to take out this loan? I think not. Because what they're going to focus on and what they're going to see is, hey, they have lower income and they have a business that's losing money. I don't necessarily want to loan someone that money when they're in that position. So that's a negative. So when we're talking about this three-legged stool, as I explained to this CPA, I said, I'm focusing on the business side. I want to help this couple here go out there and get their first deal. And so how do I do that? I do it by setting them up in a business that's not going to show a loss on their 1040 because I don't want the bank to see that they have a business that's losing money right now. Yeah, when it's making money, that's great. We could show that if we wanted to, but I don't want to show losses on their return because that's going to impair their ability to grow. And so by using the C corporation, as you stated, yeah, we're locking the losses in here, but that's intentional. It's done so that when they go to apply for a home, they show they make $100,000 a year and they're not losing money in a business. That is the difference in the approach. There's a lot of people out there that take this approach where I'm just going to focus on taxes and reduce my taxes down to zero. And I feel really great about that because I'm not paying taxes. And it's short-sighted that they're missing the larger picture. I'll tell you what, I'm guilty of that. Toby's guilty of that. When we first started our practice, this three-legged stool approach that I'm referring to right here, we went right to the tax planning side because, hey, what's not to like about putting more money back in your pocket? In fact, we were so good at it in the first couple of years of running our business, we paid zero federal income tax. Yeah. I teach an event. I would say, hey guys, who here wants to be able to pay zero tax? And everyone hand would go up. I want to pay zero tax. Well, and I'd say, let me show you what I'm doing to pay zero federal income tax. And I thought that, man, I had it. You can make $300,000 a year and not pay any tax. You thought it was really cool. But it's when I started my investing, or when we started investing, Toby and I started investing and moving outside of the business, that we realized that by paying zero federal income tax was not a positive in the overall aspect of investing, that we didn't understand at that point in time that there are good deductions and bad deductions, and certain types of losses you put on your tax return can impair your ability to grow. And that impaired our ability to really take off with our investing because nobody wanted to work with us from a lending standpoint. Because if you're going to go out there and you're growing a business or you're going to be investing in real estate, you will be working with lenders. I mean, why not? Why spend all your own cash? Use other people's money to grow. Or if you want to buy a new personal residence. So all this comes back to tax returns and taxes and how they look. And we made mistakes and we realized, hey, we need to make changes here. And that's why when I was telling the CPA, I shared with him my own story. I said, this is what we do, what we do here at Anderson for this client, is that we want to help them over here. We want to help them grow and do things in life. And in order to get there, what is the most efficient path? At the end of that conversation, I think he got it, but he didn't want to admit that, hey, there's probably some wisdom in your approach. And he threw out there one last jab at him. He said, yeah, but you've just given up all these losses if their business doesn't work out. I said, no, that's not true. I haven't given up the losses. I've set up this business in a way where we can claim those losses at any time. I can still get the client the losses, but I'm going to do it in a strategic manner. And so that everything you've been talking about, we have that ability to do, but it has to be strategic. And there's a lot of people out there that miss this concept and they just gravitate towards paying zero now in taxes or reducing my taxes as low as possible or just focus on the asset protection, not realizing there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And that's what, as I stated at Anderson, when I drew that out, this is what we're going to be talking about today. This is what you're going to be learning. By being here with us today, you're going to learn this approach to building your business, this three-legged stool approach to creating entities so you can actually do more. Now, I appreciate there's a lot of misinformation that goes on, and it's hard many times because you got a lot of individuals that tend to look at things from a different perspective. And when you read the news, you start to question, hey, should I be doing this and create it? Because I read an article, for instance, in the Washington Post that said why an LLC may not be beneficial to a small-time real estate investor. I read this article. And then you read it and you start to appreciate, hey, this person who wrote this article, they hold themselves out as an expert, and they're not a real estate investor, right? They're telling investors, don't set up LLCs for your real estate investing. And as I was reading through it, I realized they don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? They've never invested in real estate because it becomes patently obvious the reasons why they say you shouldn't use an LLC. And unfortunately, I hope a lot of people didn't read this and then follow through on the advice that this author is giving, that the reasons, the rationale for not using an LLC do not apply and they don't make sense. So for example, here's what happened in this article. The way it was set up, somebody wrote in to the Washington Post and they said, hey, I'm thinking about setting up an LLC to protect a rental property that I'm going to do some electrical work on. Well, you shouldn't do your own electrical if it's your own rental property unless you're licensed. That's all they should have said and put a period on it. But the gentleman wanted to know, should I have an LLC? Well, the author told him, hey, as we've mentioned in our prior columns, one significant disadvantage of holding properties in LLCs is that you can't find a lender willing to finance the property. Okay, so the problem with that advice is, number one, there are lenders out there that will finance properties held in limited liability companies. All right, that's not an issue. In fact, I'm going to be sharing with you some of those lenders a little bit later on today because we've built out a lending community for our platinum clients that can take advantage of this. So yes, I know there are lenders that do it. I work with lenders that finance directly into limited liability companies. But that aside, let's assume that you're not working with one of those lenders and you're working with a traditional lender. You're going down to your local bank, Wells Fargo, what we call qualified mortgage lenders, and you're working with a qualified mortgage lender to get a loan on a residential real estate. Well, the thing is that with those types of loans, the Freddie Fannie loans, you can't close in an LLC. You have to close in your own name because that's the underwriting standard that is required of someone who's borrowing to buy residential real estate. But here's the point. It doesn't matter if I have to close in my own name when I buy this house. After I close in my own name, set up an LLC and place the property into the limited liability company. So yeah, even if you have a lender that won't let you close in an LLC, you can still move it into an LLC after closing to get asset protection. So using this as a rationale to support a conclusion that LLCs are not beneficial for real estate investors, I think it's just totally ludicrous. And unfortunately, you're here today and you're learning about this, and that's great. And there's other people out there that are not here. And if they read this article, they may not be giving themselves the right type of protection based upon this advice. Now here, let me show you another error in this article as well. The second disadvantage is that some real estate investors will believe that the legal protections they have under the LLC are sufficient and they won't carry enough insurance. I'm sure many of you own property and it's financed. I know with my mortgage real estate that when it comes to insurance, I don't get to decide how much insurance I carry. My lender determines that. I could never underinsure a property that has a loan on it because if I tried to, the lender would buy its own insurance and force me to pay for it. So again, you see the problem with this author in putting out a reason why you shouldn't have an LLC that would never actually come into play here. Because when you're borrowing money, and you buy real estate, the underinsured would never become a possibility because it's outside of your control. So again, I look at this and I'm thinking, this guy doesn't own real estate. He's not an investor. And then the last aspect here, it said, hey, when small time real estate investors have a LLC set up, if they go out there and they do their own electrical and somebody's injured on that property as a result of the work that they've done, the LLC is not going to protect them. All right, now we got down to some accurate information here. Correct. So if you set up an LLC and it owns a piece of real estate, right? And you're out there and you come in here and you do the electrical work and that's the cause of the harm, that somebody gets hurt and the house burns down. And that happens. I mean, Toby and I are avid real estate investors. We've had 3 properties burned to the ground because of faulty wiring. Now, I didn't do the work. Sure hope Toby didn't. I mean, I know he's not an electrician, but the thing is that this is what can happen. We've already seen it. We've had trees fall through our houses before. Luckily for us, no one's been killed. Okay, we've had working smoke detectors in all those properties that burned down. They prevented somebody from dying. That's important. We'll talk about some scenarios later on about that. But this author that states, hey, LLC is not going to protect you, is completely right, because if you're the one that's negligent, then they can break the LLC and sue you personally for your negligence. But here's where the author's wrong. Let's assume that you own a personal residence in your own name and you have 2 other rental properties. What can happen? If somebody sues you personally because of what happened up here and they get a judgment against you, that judgment is going to attach to all of these assets. So you lose your personal residence. You can lose your other rental properties. And you see, this is where this type of thinking puts people into positions where we've run into them many, many times throughout my career, where I've talked to individuals who've told me stories where they've lost everything because of one lawsuit. And they wish they would have had this information so many years ago because it could have prevented it. But what could we do here? We could have put these assets into LLCs to make sure that when you are involved in a lawsuit, somebody gets judgment against you, they're not taking your other investments. You're not losing your personal residence. I'm going to show you how to do that today, how to put yourself in that position so that we're going to understand what it means to have a good asset protection plan. And when you hear people tell you, oh, just load up on insurance, you're going to be protected, you're going to be able to have an informed discussion with them and say, yeah, you could do that, but here are the reasons why it's not going to work out and what you need to be aware of. That's what we're going towards. And so this author, unfortunately, missed the mark here. He had an opportunity to really help someone put together the right plan. And instead of doing that, he put out a piece of information that really runs contrary to common sense when it comes to planning. All right, so before we get into showing you exactly breaking down individual strategies, I want to step back and just go through what we call our asset protection matrix here to show you how assets work. Because I know a lot of us, we have many different assets that, boats and trucks and savings accounts, brokerage accounts, real estate and businesses, and planning itself doesn't have to be that difficult. It can be really simple. And I know I've seen people on the internet, they get really complicated with the overall structuring. And I understand some people think, hey, I don't want to do that. It seems way too complicated for what I have. It doesn't need to be that way. If you understand the basic principles that we're going to be talking about here, I think you're going to get it that, certain types of assets deserve certain types of structures. And so once we break that down, planning can become really simple. And not only is it simple to put in place, it can all be very simple to maintain, to move forwards with, and it doesn't take a lot of lifting. That's the one thing that people will say many times. Well, what does it mean on an annual basis to maintain it? Well, it doesn't have to be complicated, right? We don't need to make it complicated if we understand this. So what does this matrix represent? It represents us, our assets. And there's 4 quadrants here to this matrix. And what we call this is our personal quadrant right up here. This is our no risk quadrant, no risk investments. And then down here, I have the business quadrant. This is your active part of your life. And this is the risk investments. If you have access to a piece of paper, I highly encourage you to be following along and writing this stuff down right now and drawing this out. taking your own assets and putting them into this quadrant, and then writing up, all right, these are the types of entities, because that's what I'm about to show you. Okay, so personal quadrant. Guys, what goes into our personal quadrant? We're going to put our personal assets into there, all right? Things that we use on a daily basis. I was speaking to someone just the other day, and they had a bunch of entities set up. And I asked them, where is their personal bank account held? Because they had an estate plan, a living trust. And they said, oh, we don't have a personal bank account. I said, what do you mean you don't have a personal bank account? He said, oh, no, we have an LLC and we pay everything out of the LLC. I said, that's a problem. And they go, well, why is that a problem? I said, well, your personal bank account, your groceries, how do you pay for those? LLC. How about your mortgage? Oh, that's paid out of the LLC. And so everything I asked them, water, utilities, all out of the LLC, car payment out of the LLC. And they thought that was protection. In reality, it's doing just the opposite for them in their lives. It's taking what could be a strong plan because they had other entities, and they're blowing it all up and they're weakening it because they're using the wrong types of assets, putting them in the wrong types of structures. And so our personal assets are things that we use on a day in and day out basis. So what would that be? Our personal residence would go into our personal quadrant. That's personal in nature. Our checking account that we use to pay our bills, that goes in our personal quadrant. Jewelry, all right? That's going to be in your personal quadrant because it's a personal effect or item that we carry around. Vehicles would go into your personal quadrant. Your boat, you got a boat. Jet skis, all right, would go inside of there. Motorcycles, anything that's personal in nature, that's not a business asset or related to a business, sits in your personal quadrant. That's it. Now, the challenge is understanding what we can do with those assets, what types of structures we should be employing to deal with these assets. Your IRA, retirement account goes in there. Here's what we use in this quadrant, okay? We're going to use a living trust. I'll talk about this later, and Toby will as well. Living trust is one of the most important foundational structures you will be creating during your lifetime. This is what takes everything you have and ensures that you continue on with the growth of your assets that's passed on in a way in which attorneys aren't going to get involved. You avoid probate, and it gives structure to those that come behind us. And it gives responsibility as well. That is something we're going to be utilizing for these types of assets, a living trust. Another thing we would look at here is a residence trust. All right, for our personal residence right here. And I'll explain this. All right, you want protection for your personal residence? We're not using LLCs. We're going to use a residence trust for that house. So that's an item. Another thing we will look at here is a solo 401k or self-directed IRA. Both of these are trusts. So maybe you've caught on to something here. Personal assets, your personal assets, the strategies that we're going to be utilizing and talking about and what you'll be considering creating are all going to be trust related. All of these go into various types of trust. Personal property trust would be in this quadrant as well. So we're not using business entities. We're using trusts to protect these assets. Now, no risk investments. Those are investments that do not create liability for you. So those are real simple to put down. What I mean by don't create liability is that you can have a whole bunch of them and you're not going to get sued. That is, the asset itself isn't going to be create the liability. A great example would be your brokerage account, your personal brokerage account, a stock account, right? That's never going to create, you're not going to be sued because you own stock in Microsoft. It just doesn't happen, right? Can you imagine somebody comes into your office and they see your share certificate sitting on the desk, right? And they pick it up and go, wow, this is pretty cool. Microsoft stock, huh? And then they take that share certificate and they cut their finger accidentally because they're just holding on to it. And they're so impressed by the share certificate. And then they got this open wound and they go out, they're walking down the street and somebody's animal had left a little mess there on the sidewalk and they don't want anybody to step into it. So they reach down with some tissue to try to push it off into the bushes on the side and they get some of that animal mess, doggy do into that cut and it turns into MRSA and they lose their entire arm. And then they turn around and they want to sue you because they're going to say, I lost my arm by picking up that dog mess because there was an open wound that resulted from my picking up that share certificate that you enticed me to look at by leaving it on your desk. How many of you think that that type of lawsuit has any merit? All right. Probably a lot of you are going, gosh, what is Clint drinking? Has he already started on that wine over his shoulder today? That just sounds off the chart. Well, it is off the chart. Those types of lawsuits, that would get thrown out of court in 49 states. Why did I say 49? Because there's one state where you could move forward with that type of case. It's California, unfortunately. Every messed up case I've ever read come out of California. That's probably one of the ones they would say, oh, yeah, you can sue them. Obviously, yeah, when you pick up dog messes and stuff like that, it all relates back to the person with the share certificate. So this is what I mean by safe assets. You're not going to be sued because you have these assets. They're not harming people. So we want to put our savings account over here as well. That goes into the safe asset realm. Crypto would be over here. Syndications. If you invest in other people's deals, that's going to go on this side. Private notes would be sitting over here. Metals like gold, things like that, silver, all that would, stamps, collectibles would be here. So assets that do not create liability for us, we're going to list all those in the no risk quadrant. Now, you're probably wondering, does that mean my personal savings account will be in this quadrant? Absolutely. My personal savings account's in this quadrant. I do not have a personal savings account that I keep around for Clint individually. No, I want all that stuff protected. I put it into this quadrant right here. Why? Because with these assets, they're not creating liability. I'm creating liability. I'm the one that has a boat and could accidentally, maybe I'm driving around and there's a diver, he comes up and I clip him with my boat one day because I didn't see his dive buoy, or he's too far separated from the dive buoy that should have been above him, and I still clip him. I can get sued that way. Or I'm driving my truck and there's somebody that's, one of those people who like to do drugs out in the open on the sidewalk that you see everywhere in our country today, and he jumps out in the front of me because he's wandering around in a daze, and I hit him, and then I get sued from some public interest attorney that said I should have been more aware of the intoxicated people that are on the sidewalk. So anything like that comes against you liability-wise, or you're into an agreement with someone to lease space, and then you realize, hey, this was a bad decision, and I want to break the lease, and then you get sued under the contract. Now, a lot of these things you're not going to be covered in insurance by. So how do I protect these types of assets from those types of claims, or claims brought against my children because they make a mistake in their life? Well, what we want to do here is we're going to create a limited liability company. One LLC. All you need to do, I'd create an LLC here. This is going to be a Wyoming limited liability company. We're going to set that up. Right? This is what a lot of people that are out there that have these types of assets are missing out on. And when tragedy strikes, these assets are what attorneys want to go after because they're the lowest hanging fruit. And you don't want to make it so that all someone has to do is get a judgment against you, and then they can take all these accounts. They'll just fall like dominoes, just like this. I've heard plenty of stories from individuals who told me, hey, yeah, I went to my bank account and I had no money because my personal creditor filed a writ of garnishment on my personal checking account, my savings account, my stock account, and the institution gave all the funds to them. I had no defenses. And that's the way it works. So our clients, what they're doing is they're putting up walls, they're putting up defenses. So things like that, if they do happen in their life, they're not going to be placed in that type of situation. So by putting all of these assets into a Wyoming LLC, and I'm very specific about this, you're probably wondering why Wyoming? Because what I'm looking for here is protection from our personal creditors. I want to make sure that if somebody sues me, they cannot take these assets. And in order to do that, you have to have a limited liability company that offers. This is an important word you want to write down. You want to make sure that your limited liability company that you create, the state where you set it up in, has what are called strong charging order protections. Strong charging order protections. This is critical. If you don't have this, then that box is not going to protect your assets. Now you're probably going, well, what is a charging order protection? Charging order protection means this. If someone got a judgment against me for $500,000, and inside of this blue box, I have assets equal to $450,000. If they get a charging order against me, then this charging they get a judgment against me. With this judgment, they cannot go and take my limited liability company from me. They can't take it. Now, why can't they take it? Because this is a Wyoming LLC. In the state of Wyoming, their law does not allow a creditor to take your LLC. So your personal creditors can't take your LLC. Now, if unfortunately you're an uninformed investor, you read about LLCs and you set up an LLC for yourself in California and you think you have asset protection because you heard LLCs offer asset protection, doesn't work that way. If this was a California LLC, a personal creditor of yours could take your California LLC. This is the scary thing about asset protection for many people when they realize this, when they're involved in a lawsuit and the structures they created, they thought were designed to protect them, only to find out that their state law does not offer those types of protections. Because again, it's not a one size fits all. Every state is different. And understanding those nuances is critical to building, I think we can agree, a sound plan. Now, so strong charge order protections means this, that the creditor can't take your LLC. The creditor can't force you to distribute assets to them to pay off that judgment as well. The creditor can't take over control of your limited liability company. So this is an LLC you set up, really simple. Remember I told you can make this very simple. You don't have to make it complicated. You set up an LLC. It's a disregarded company. It doesn't have to file a tax return. You put your assets into it, and then you just go about your life like nothing's changed. Because really nothing's changed. They're all in there. You still have access to them. You can use them any way you would like at any time. It's just the name, how they're held has gone from Clint to the blue box. But when tragedy strikes, that's when you're going to see the benefit of doing this, because they can't take your LLC. They can't get control of it. They can't force you to distribute money. The only thing they can obtain from you is what is called a charging order, which means this, that if I ever took money out of my LLC, if I wanted to distribute myself $20,000, then the court will say, Clint, if you want to take out 20, you got to pay it to your creditor until you've retired this judgment. Well, heck, I don't know about you, but if judge told me if I take money out of my LLC, I got to pay it to a creditor, I'm not taking money out of my LLC. I'm leaving money in my LLC and I'm going to allow it to continue to grow and I'm not paying my creditor. In fact, what I'm going to do is make my creditor pay my taxes on my income that's generated from that LLC. Yeah, that's a whole other aspect of using these types of structures. That's awesome. That you can use this blue box as an income generator. Now it's completely tax-free to you. You're sending the tax bill to your creditor. How do you think that's going to make them feel? I got no money, but I got a tax bill. They're probably going to be really upset with their attorney from even going down this road and opening up that box. This is what planning can do. People who understand this and put these things in place do not fall into these traps where they lose their assets. Like you hear stories all the time. Yeah, now I'm starting over at the age of 55 or 60 because I used to and I no longer do, because this type of planning wasn't set up before that happened. Just like that gentleman I was talking about in Georgia, where they were going after him because they said he had so much equity in his property and they saw that. Had he come to us 4 years ago and been on an event just like this where you're today, sitting here listening to this information, and then he started working with us, one of the recommendations I would have made to him is said, hey, I see you got a lot of equity in your house. You want to make that equity disappear to make it appear that it's not an attractive asset to a potential creditor? Who wouldn't want to do that, right? Why would I want somebody to look at my house and think, oh, yeah, I can get paid by forcing them to sell that property because look at all this equity. We can use this LLC here to make all the equity in your house disappear. Really simple strategy there. And so had I been working with him or had he been working with Anderson, we could have showed him that path to protect that equity to give him a stronger position to negotiate that settlement with that aggressive creditor who's trying to force him into bankruptcy. Completely different outcome, but it requires laying the proper foundation at the very beginning to give yourself those options. That's what entities can do for you. Set them up the right way. Now you have options. Without these entities in place, you don't have these types of options. And that's what we find successful real estate investors have embraced, and they appreciate that this is what it can do for them. Now, charging order protections, put all these assets into a Wyoming LLC. It's got to be Wyoming. It could also be Delaware. They have strong laws as well. But a lot of states out there, they're not going to give this type of protection. Now, the active quadrant, quadrant number 3, this is where your active businesses are going to go. So let's assume that you flip real estate, you wholesale. Maybe you run a nail salon, delivery business, any active business, real estate agent, anything that's where you're working in it to generate the income, it's your business, all right, then that's going to fit into this quadrant. Now, in this particular quadrant for active businesses, we have two concerns. One is liability. Want to make sure that we're doing everything to protect you, not only from your business, but from your employees, if you have employees. And the other is going to be taxes. Both of these are really important and require careful analysis. I already gave you an example today of someone that we created a C corporation for, who a CPA did not like that idea, thought it should be something else, save on the personal side on taxes, not understanding that taxes, by setting your business up the right way from a tax perspective, can help you increase your wealth because you're going to look better to lenders. So these are the things we need to focus on. It's not just about your business. It's also about what you're doing outside of that business, because it all should be a plan. Don't you think that it all works together and that's not just in silos and that this silo over here is impairing what you're doing on this side? No, they can be mutually beneficial if it's done the right way. So what types of entities do we use on this quadrant here? We use 2 different types of entities. We use traditional corps and Inc., or we're going to use an LLC for these businesses. Now, the difference between these two is that if you set up a traditional corporation, you have the option to create a C or an S for tax purposes. C corporations tax at a flat 21%. An S corporation is a flow through. So whatever money you make flows down to your personal tax return and shows up on your 1040. An LLC can be set up to be treated for federal tax purposes as a C, an S, a partnership, or disregarded entity. So LLCs, I mean, a lot of people use them all the time in their planning. They set up limited liability companies. It's become a very popular form of business structuring. We use a lot of LLCs with our clients, but not in all cases. Because what we want to do is we want to analyze your business, what you're doing with it, where you intend to take it, and look at what you have going on the outside to make sure that we're choosing the right form. And a lot of people tend to gravitate towards this LLC. And I'm going to say it's not, always the best decision. So in the active business quadrant, what we want to do is make sure that we're managing your taxes appropriately so that you're not overpaying. You're taking good deductions and not bad deductions, which Toby's going to be going into. Very important concept. And it's helping you grow your investing. Those are the things that we focus on. Now, let me just show you an example of what you can do wrong. This was a scenario where an individual we're working with, happens to be this is one of our platinum clients. He was working with our team, talking about doing some structuring, some advanced structuring. What had happened was he had an LLC set up here. And he had a CPA on the outside that he'd been working with before coming to Anderson. And that CPA had structured his energy bar business in the LLC. And he set up the LLC as an S corporation for federal tax purposes. And so our team starts working with this individual. And one of the things that comes up is like, how far are you along with this energy bar business? And his point was, he goes, well, I'm just getting started with it. It's only been in business now for a year. And my CPA said, set up an S Corp. So, you get the flow through taxation. You don't have the double taxation associated with C Corps, and an LLC is easier to run. So when you hear that, right, and there's a lot of people out there that hear that same narrative over and over again. LLCs are easy to run. S corporations will flow through. C corporations have double taxation. And all that sounds, does it not? If I ask you that, hey, how many of you think that sounds a great plan? Let's avoid double taxation. Let's go with the easy way to go. A lot of people are saying, hey, yeah, that sounds awesome. But a careful analysis of it, if you look at it, you have to think, as I said earlier, beyond just that entity. And so our team looked at that and we said, okay, so what do you want to do with this energy bar business? He said, I want to blow it up. What do you mean blow it up? Because I want to grow this business and then I want to be acquired. Okay, so we asked him, do you want to sell in the future? And he said, yeah, he wants to sell and be acquired. I said, cool. So you want to blow it up and then you want to sell it at some point in time in the future. That's your goal for this business. So if that's your goal, how would you like to have a business that you could sell and potentially not have to pay any federal income tax on the sale of that business? Show of hands here. How many people would like to do that? Who wouldn't like to do that? So this is the fundamental difference, is that when you're working with someone and you're helping them structure their business, you got to know the questions to ask. And there's a lot of people that don't ask the right questions out there. And so people get trapped in these business structures that when an exit comes along or when an opportunity comes along, they can't maximize the potential because those thought processes. I see a lot of hearts going up and hands going up. Thanks, guys. I mean, I know this is important, right? To understand this, to be able to sell a business. So what are we referring to here? Well, this LLC, what our team did is they said, let's change it. Let's create a traditional corporation right here. And we're going to create a C Corp for your business. And we're going to then license the energy bar, the patent on that energy bar. We're going to license it to your C Corp. And this is where you're going to run your business. And of course, everything that we hear, double taxation, C Corps are more complicated. They're not. And double taxation is not a bad thing because you can control all of that. You're in complete control. And that's the thing people don't tell you when it comes to C Corps. You're in complete control. But here's the deal. We're going to run that energy bar business through this C Corp, traditional corp, not an LLC. And then in the future, when you decide to sell anything between between $0 and $10 million, whatever you sell it for, between that range right there, every dollar you earn, tax free. Now, if you go beyond 10 million, great, good for you. You hit a home run. You'll pay taxes on the gain beyond 10 million. But we just put you in a position now where you're going to get a tax-free exit on the first $10 million. Maybe it only sells for $2 million, tax-free. That's a $400,000 savings right there by doing this, by using a C corporation. 25 years of experience in doing this, working with people. This is the number one complaint that I have heard voiced to me time and time again from individuals that built businesses. My CPA told me to set up an S corporation, and I followed the advice because of double taxation, complication, blah, 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 blah. And they wish they would have done a C Corp. This is what can be done with entities and working with people who understand it. So here's great there, setting up your business. So think about business quadrant. We could use LLCs. It just got to ask the right questions. I'm not saying LLCs are bad and they should never be used. What I'm saying is you need to look at your planning and let's develop a plan together to help you achieve your goals. Now, the risk side of the investing, here's the thing here, risky investments. Of course, that's going to be real estate, just like this. Now, with our real estate, we want to make sure that if something goes wrong here, it's not going to take these assets down with it. We want to mitigate our overall risk. We want to make sure that our assets are protected from us if we make mistakes. I want to be protected from my assets if something goes wrong with my asset. And more importantly, I want to make sure my assets are protected from each other. So in this quadrant, what we're going to be discussing is I'm going to be showing you how to use LLCs to accomplish this. I'm also going to share with you how to use a tool called a series limited liability company. We're going to talk about land trusts and their importance in planning. We're also going to talk about Wyoming statutory trusts and how they can be used for real estate investing for these types of assets. And you're probably asking yourself, well, why is Clint giving us 4 separate options when it comes to protecting our risky assets, investment assets. It's because the determination as to which structure we use is going to be based upon where you live and where you're investing. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We're going to take a 10-minute break. When I come back, we're going to get into protecting investment real estate. And I'm going to show you how to use these types of tools to do just that. Guys, I'll see you back.
I remember a question once, somebody said, hey, why should I use Andersen? Well, you could use a separate financial firm, a separate tax firm, a separate legal firm, and you could bounce them around and see if they could ever get on the same page. I mean, when was the last time they all got together and worked on your benefit?
And so at Andersen, what we've learned over the years is that it's best to combine both the tax and the asset protection and the financial planning in one space, so the clients feel like all their needs are being addressed and they're not having to be bounced around through multiple professionals who do not communicate. At Andersen, you're going to get this experience where when you come to us, everything is going to be handled for you from A to Z.
We design individualized, comprehensive plans for each of our clients. And when you work with us, you become part of the Andersen family.
We form tens of thousands of business entities every year in all 50 states.
We strive to provide world-class service for all of our clients.
Helping our clients pass their wealth down to their heirs and beneficiaries is an important part of what we do here at Andersen.
Our team of professionals answer our clients' questions and walk them through tax planning and asset protection strategies.
We've been around for 20 years and it's been quite a journey to get to the point where we are today, where we have over 200 employees and offices over 3 different states. And I can tell you it's really been driven by our philosophies, and we want to make sure our clients understand asset protection, tax planning, and business planning. And this is what makes what Andersen does unique in our space.
A lot of folks are surprised when they talk to our attorneys and our accountants. We are teachers first. It doesn't do us a lot of good if a client is completely in the dark as to why we are doing what we're doing. We want to make sure the clients understand it and are actually in the driver's seat, driving us towards making sure that they're saving as much money as humanly possible.
We make sure that our clients know how to maintain their records and execute the best business practices to stay in compliance. That way we greatly minimize the threat of lawsuits and audits. We joke, we laugh, and we have fun at our seminars. But when it comes down to it, we're very serious about helping our clients become knowledgeable and successful.
All right. As I stated, we're going to talk about investment real estate now and what you can do to protect your investment real estate. So I want to start off with this in mind, in how we go about protecting our investment real estate. Let's assume that we have 4 properties, okay? And when we're looking at those 4 properties, how do we analyze them? Well, a lot of people, what they're going to say is, let's look at the value of the real estate. Now, these properties, what they're worth, I'm not concerned about what they're worth, right? Because with a piece of real estate, okay, what are we trying to protect? If I bought this, if this property is worth $500,000, but I owe $450, how much am I trying to protect here? What is at risk in the event of a lawsuit from an asset perspective? Well, it's the equity. It's the $50,000 in the property is what's at risk. This is what you could stand to lose, because the bank's owed $450, the property's worth $500. So the equity is what people a lot of times will look at when they're judging their property. So if you had 4 pieces of property and each property had $80,000 in equity in it, amongst these 4 properties, then you have $320,000 at risk, okay? So how would you go about planning for that? Well, I can tell you what we used to do, okay? When I first got started 20 some years ago, I know it sounds like a long time now, 20 some years ago, I would tell people, hey, let's do this. Let's create one limited liability company and put all of those properties into this one LLC. And further assume that each of those properties generates $5,000 a year in net income. So you've got an asset now, or an LLC that holds 4 properties that has $320,000 in equity amongst all those properties, and it makes $20K a year in income. Right. So for a lot of us, we've been told, a lot of people out there have been told, this is what you do. You put several properties in one LLC, group them together, and put them inside of there, because what you're protecting against is the equity, right? So what is your risk tolerance is another way people will often describe this. And when we were on break, I noticed that there were several questions in the Q&A, people indicating, hey, I have 2 properties in one LLC. I have 3 properties in an LLC. I saw one question there, I think it was 6 properties in an LLC. So why has this happened? Why are there 3 properties, 6 properties, 2 properties in the same limited liability company? Because we're looking at it and we're thinking, all right, I want asset protection. I can put these properties in one limited liability company. So if something happens, I'm protected. I understand that thinking. But what we're missing out on as well is that if something happens with the property, so if something happens with this property and if you have 4 properties in one LLC, then all 4 properties are at risk, right? Because they're going to sue that LLC. And if they sue the LLC, any of the assets that you have inside of that LLC are now subject to that creditor's claim. So many times people say, well, yeah, well, Clint, it's $320K. That's my risk tolerance level. And I understand that. And I've seen it happen. Like I said, I used to make the same recommendation. But after about 4 years of practice, I realized that 7 years, I realized that was the wrong recommendation. And the reason why I was making the recommendation is because I was falling into this trap that I think a lot of people fall into, is that they think of the LLC as an expense and that it's going to take a lot to maintain it. And they start saying, well, why would I create an extra LLC for each individual property? Because that's just going to be this added expense. And not look at it from the standpoint that it's an investment, that by putting it in place, it's going to do something for you rather than do something to you. And there's a lot of people that have that mindset that multiple LLCs is doing something to them. It's making their life more difficult, more complicated. It's more expensive. And there isn't a return by doing that for them. Not realizing that by structuring your investment real estate like this, to show you here, creating one LLC per property, it's doing something for you with this type of planning. So what do I mean by that? Well, why are you investing? Let's just talk about that. For many of us, it's because we want to create more cash flow. Maybe we want a spouse to be able to quit their job so they no longer have to work, they can focus on real estate full time. Maybe it's to send our kids to college. Maybe it's to create retirement income. Maybe it's all of those, right? So we're investing to create income. That's what it is, to create passive income. And so if that's our goal, to create this passive income, then when we look at creating LLCs, our goal should be, how do I preserve as much of that passive income as possible against the threats that exist out there with real estate? So if you had 4 LLCs set up, 1 property per LLC, and let's assume something goes wrong with this property right here. We have a client that came to us, unfortunately, after the harm occurred. But what had happened is that she had a piece of property, a rental property, in her own name, unfortunately. And the neighbor's dog, little tiny dog, like a Shih Tzu, climbed under the fence and went after her tenant's Rottweiler that was chained to a pole in a fenced-in backyard. So this little dog was a trespasser, climbed under the fence, and then attacked the Rottweiler. I have a Shih Tzu, and I can tell you, when she looks in a mirror, she sees a Rottweiler staring back at her. Okay, she doesn't understand she's a small dog. No, she sees herself as a big dog, and she takes on that persona. Well, that's what this one did. And you can imagine what's going to happen. Well, the owner of the Shih Tzu hears this, of course, the dog screaming, jumps the fence, runs to save her little dog from this Rottweiler that the little dog attacked, and gets bit and mauled in the process. So, 2 trespassers on this person's property. They turn around, the injured neighbor sues our client for being mauled by her tenant's dog. And she turns this over to her insurance company, and the insurance company refuses to provide any protection because they said there's an exclusion in the property for dangerous animals, and that Rottweiler falls within the exclusion as a dangerous animal. So she's out on her own. Well, the point is this. If she had been properly structured with 1 LLC per property, what is the most that the neighbor could collect upon? Well, if each of these properties is worth $80,000 in equity, then the most they could collect is this one asset here, which would be $80K. So by using this type of planning, what you're saving, the investment you make to put together one LLC per property, what you're saving in my example is $240,000 in assets by doing that. So if something like what I just described occurred and you have this type of structure in place, you just saved $240,000. To me, that's a win. Whereas if you did it on this side and you had all 4 properties in one LLC and that same exact story or that same exact harm occurred, then all of these assets are at risk. So you lose $320,000. So that's the difference here in the planning, right? One LLC per property. If something goes wrong, you've saved all your properties outside of that one. Whereas when you group properties, you've put all of those properties in that grouping at risk for that one asset or that one risk. Now, that's really not what motivates me when I recommend this type of planning. What motivates me is what motivates all of us to invest in real estate. It's not equity, right? That's for flippers. Flippers invest for equity in the property because they're selling the property and that's how they're making their money. Investors invest for cash flow, right? We invest for cash flow. We invest to create an income stream to do everything that I just described. Now let's think about this for a moment. Assume that you start investing and you build up a portfolio of 4 or 5 properties, and now your spouse is able to quit her job. You're able to send your daughter to private school. You're able to take family vacations to Europe, now something you've always dreamed of, and you can do that, or you just have a retirement income now built up. And then this one harm occurs and it wipes out all of these assets right here. Not only did you lose this, but you also lost a lifestyle because your lifestyle had changed because of your investing. You had taken this $20,000 in income and you'd made changes to what you were doing with your lifestyle. You had benefits now that comes from that. You have retirement that came from that. But that when you get wiped out, you just wiped out all of that income. So now not only are you starting out with no properties, you're starting out with no cash flow. And this is the thing that I impress upon investors all the time is that when we're investing, we invest for cash flow. So don't look at the assets and say, well, it's only 2 properties. They only have $60,000 in equity. Look at the cash flow because that is what we're trying to preserve. Now, here in my example with 1 property per LLC, well, I mean, you can get it. You may lose this one, so you lose $5,000 a year, but you still have, what did I save? I still have $15,000 a year coming in. So I want to make sure that that cash flow is going to be there for my retirement, for my spouse, for my family. So that's why we recommend when you're structuring investment real estate, you use 1 LLC per property. Now, it's this structuring that I'm referring to here. This is something, as I stated, I had started to realize this is the way you should go about 7 years after practicing. Because at that point in time, I understood that equity was not the motivating factor for investment real estate investors. It was cash flow. And by telling people to put 4 properties in an LLC, I was really making a judgment call for them, thinking back, oh, well, you create 1 LLC, it's an expense. And I didn't understand at that point in time that it's an investment, that the return on that investment can be astronomical if something goes wrong. But there comes a time when you no longer have to use this 1 property per LLC strategy. Now, some people choose to do it. We have titanium clients that can create as many LLCs as they like with us for 1 small investment. They get set up and they'll set up 30, 40, 50 LLCs. I get it. You want to create those? You can do it. Because like I said, it's not a lot of work to maintain a structure like that. But in my own investing with Toby, we shared with you, we have over 300 properties, different asset classes. We do not have 300 LLCs. Okay? I just don't do it because I don't need it. Here's what I do. We have 10 properties per limited liability company, and we have 30 LLCs set up. I put 10 per LLC. And let's assume that each LLC generates $50,000 a year in income. And each LLC has is worth $500K. Each of those properties has $50,000 in equity. So I've got 30 of them, right? Generating $50,000 a year. That's $1.5 million in income. So why do I group my properties? Because when we're thinking about asset protection, as your portfolio starts to grow, you can take on more risk. It's the opposite of what so many people assume. They assume that I need more protection because I have more assets, and so I have more at risk. I can absorb more risk because of the level of assets that I have. When you're first starting out, you can't take as much risk as I can because one mistake can take everything away. 10 years of work can be wiped out because of one mistake. I make a mistake, I lose 10 properties. I lose $50,000 a year in income. But what did I save? What do I still have coming in? I have $1.45 million still coming in. Do you think losing $50,000 is going to change the wine that I drink? No, it's not. It's not going to change where I vacation. It's not going to change where I go to dinner because I have sufficient amount of assets now, which allow me to take on more risk. So I don't have to employ the same strategies I was using when I first started my investing. And that's what, when we look at planning, we tell our clients is like, when you get to a certain point, 15 properties, then you can start grouping. And I encourage you to start grouping your properties, at that point in time, because now you've got sufficient cash flow coming in that you could take a hit and lose 2 properties, but it's not going to change your lifestyle. And that is what I've seen time and time again with people who sit down with me and they tell me a story like this. I think of this couple. They were in their 60s and they retired. And I was teaching an event, an in-person event, and they said, "Okay, Clint, can we meet with you after class? I really have something we want to go over." I said, "Okay, I'll sit down with you. Definitely, that's what I'm here for." And so I sat down with them and they told me that they're real estate investors. And they had retired in their late 50s. They retired with, I forget, 16 properties, 16 rental properties. And they had all these plans for their retirement. They're sending their son to Arizona State University, and then, he's going to graduate a course. And then they had all this income coming in between their retirement and their rental property, and everything was planned out for them. They're going to vacation and enjoy the remainder of their lives. But their son went off to ASU. And he was involved in a car accident. He hit someone, unfortunately, made him a paraplegic. And the attorneys went after the parents because they owned the car. And the parents had the deep pockets. And they told me that they were forced into bankruptcy when they were 63 years old, completely wiped out. So here they are, 65. And they're at my event. And they're starting over their lives. They had to go back out and find new jobs. And they're building up their rental portfolio again. And the thing that they told me is that this time they're going to do it right because they had relied on that other type of advice that people get all the time. They were told, don't worry about it, just get insurance. It's going to protect you. That's all you need. Or maybe set up one LLC and you set one property per, that's just overboard protection. It'll never happen. Well, it did for them. And the one thing they asked me is they said, will you take us on as a client, understanding the position we're in today and where we want to go tomorrow? Because we're committed to doing it right this time. We realized we made a mistake, and they didn't hold anything against anyone. They had come to the acceptance. They said, hey, we know how to do this. We've done it before. Our retirement years have been pushed off now, 10 years later, but we're going to get there. But the difference they said to me was that they want to work with someone who's going to help them set up the structures the right way. So if something like that ever happens again in their life, which they hope it wouldn't, of course, that they wouldn't be in the same position they are today. And when I ask you to think about that, you're out there, you're investing, you're growing a business. How many of us could handle that type of drastic change, that a life's work is wiped out because of one mistake? I think it's going to be devastating. And there's not a lot of people that would adopt their point of view and say, hey, it happens and I can move forwards. A lot of us would be pretty devastated and not see a way out of that. And it would probably drive us down to dark places in our personal life to know that you had this and then it's gone
because of aggressive creditors that see a profit-making opportunity. And so this is why, excuse me, with this type of planning, we're recommending you start with one LLC. And then as you go along, as I said, you can start grouping properties together. Now, the LLC approach, it really depends on where you're investing, whether or not we're going to use a limited liability company. For example, let's say you're in Texas. Let's talk about a series LLC right now. So if I was in Texas, and that's a series state. So if you happen to invest into a state that recognizes a series LLC, maybe you'll do something like this. You set up a limited liability company right here. It's called a series LLC. Now, what's great about this type of structure is that unlike, say, Washington State, where I have to create one LLC per property, in Texas, which is a series state that recognizes this particular form, you only have to create one LLC. That's it. But you set up a very specific type of LLC, which is called a series. And then I create cells for each of my deals, my properties. And into these cells, I put my investments. So similar to what I showed you over here, where I had 4 separate LLCs created, here I create one LLC that I file with the state, and then I create A, B, and C, these cells. Those are not separate LLCs. That right there is a separate agreement. It's a 3-page agreement that you create, or we create it for our clients. Send it out to them, they sign it, and now it has the equivalency of a separate LLC. Really simple to do. And so you can create as many cells as you want. There's no limit to the number you can have. And what you're doing is you're creating a structure whereby by placing each property in its own cell, if something goes wrong with that property, it's only that one cell that's at risk. So the series LLC is a great structure for those of you that invest into a state that recognizes it. Now, just because a state recognizes the series LLC doesn't mean it's always going to be the right structure for you or in how you set it up. Because typically we'll set these up where all the cells are owned by this one company here. You also need to understand how the state treats these entities from a tax standpoint. What am I referring to? Well, Tennessee also recognizes the series LLC, right? And you can protect yourself like this in Tennessee, but you have to change it. And where I'm going at here is I was working with a client a number of years ago, and he working with a CPA. He's out of Florida. He's a Florida investor. And he came on board and started working with us now. And he had several assets in Tennessee, was set up with a series LLC, like I'm showing you right here. All the cells were owned by the parent. And immediately when I look at that, I realized, hey, we got a problem. I said, let me see a copy of your tax return. He sent his tax return. I saw that he was spending $50,000 a year in taxes to the state of Tennessee. I looked at that. I said, hey, you know what? You're going to be really glad you started working with Anderson, because I'm going to save you $50,000 a year that you're overpaying now in taxes. And he says, what are you talking about? And I said, well, your CPA that you're working with, he set up a series LLC. So he understands the concept of it, that you can do this and you can use it in Tennessee. But the problem was in the execution. You see, just because you can do something and the state recognizes it, you also need to look at how the state's going to treat it from a tax standpoint. Because the last thing we want to do is put you in a position where you're going to be paying more in taxes, or you're going to reassess the property by creating the structure. And so what I explained to him is that in Tennessee, they have a franchise tax. And by the way you structured yourself, you're subject to that franchise tax. That's why you're paying that extra $50K. So what I want to do for you is I want to make sure that all these cells going forward are owned by you individually and not over here by the parent. And this gentleman said, well, Clint, I saw your video. And I said, I know you, what, on YouTube about series LLCs? He goes, yeah, you said to have them all owned by the parent. So that's an example. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Depending on where the assets are located, we have to change the strategy potentially to make sure we're not putting you in this type of position. So Tennessee recognizes it, but it's a little different structuring that goes on. So we corrected his, saved him the money going forwards.
That's a win for him, of course, huge win. Doesn't mean we can do that for everyone, but if we can, we're going to see that, spot it. And one of the reason why we're able to do this is because we set these entities up in all 50 states. Our clients invest all over the US. Toby and I invest in multiple different states. And so we're bringing strategies to bear that we're using for ourselves and those of our clients. And this is just one of those. So the Series LLC is a great structure. The other thing you might want to consider is a land trust where you're investing. Now, land trusts have a lot of important uses for the residential real estate investor. Okay. Number one, if you're investing in Florida, then you want to use a land trust, okay, for asset protection purposes. Florida is the only state that will provide you asset protection. So if you had a house in Florida that has a mortgage on it, we're going to put that house into a Florida land trust, just like this. That is equal to using a Florida LLC from an asset protection standpoint, meaning if something goes wrong with the property and the tenant brings a lawsuit, they're suing the trust. If the property's in a Florida LLC, they're going to sue the LLC. So if you're the owner, you're protected. But why am I recommending a trust for your Florida investments versus the LLC? Because a lot of people have mortgaged real estate. And if you have debt on your property and you place it into a limited liability company in Florida, you're going to be subject to dock stamps or a transfer tax. Now, I don't know about you, if I can get asset protection and not have to pay any tax to obtain that asset protection, I'm going that route. Why would I want to pay tax to the state of Florida? Well, there's a lot of people out there that don't know about this and they make that mistake. In fact, one of my good friends, I was golfing with him the other day. He's an attorney here in Washington State. And years ago, he works with real estate investors. His client has property down in Florida. He set up an LLC for their secondary residence that they rented out part-time. He transferred their Florida property into a limited liability company. And they got a bill for $1,400. And he called me up. He said, "Clint, what is this?" I said, "Oh, Florida property. You didn't know about the dock stamps." He said, "What are you talking about, dock stamps?" He said, "Well, I do this all the time in Washington." I said, "I know that works in Washington. You can get away with it. But in Florida, they have a little, in their tax and revenue code down there, when you do that, you transfer real estate that's encumbered into an LLC, it's a taxable event." He said, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "I use a land trust in Florida because it's not subject to that." See, different investments require different tools. Now for him, I said, "I guess this was a $1,400 learning experience for you because you're going to have to cover your client's dock stamps because you recommended they make that transfer." And he still remembers to this day when we talk about it, the high cost of education and not knowing how things work in other states. And a lot of attorneys, your local guys, they're not going to know what Florida is about if you're not from Florida. So they give you the advice based upon what they do locally, not understanding you're investing nationally. And there's different things that come into play there. So a land trust is great in Florida for asset protection. Now, land trusts also work in all 50 states, but we use them for other reasons. For example, I said there was a gentleman that said he had multiple properties in one LLC, and he was talking about moving them out. So let's say that you've already put yourself in this position right here, which is a weak position to be in. We want you to be in a strong position where if something goes wrong, you've not risked all three properties. So the question is, how do I get these properties out into a structure like this where I have one property per LLC? Well, you could do this. Say you're here, you own these LLCs, you could deed the property to yourself and then deed it over here. Now, the risk in doing that is that if there's a transfer tax, you're going to subject yourself to transfer tax now, and you got to file 2 deeds to make this transfer. And there's a paper trail. People will see it. So what we like to do here to solve this issue is we'll say, hey, create some land trust, create 2 land trusts here, move your property into the land trust. And then with the land trust, because it's not recorded anywhere, you can then assign your interest to these other LLCs and no one's going to see it and it's not going to be subject to taxation. So here's a strategy I just shared with you. If you've got multiple properties locked in one LLC and you want to move them to separate LLCs, then you need to be writing down right now, hey, to move these properties out, to get the type of protection Clint's talking about, I need to set up land trust. This is what you want to do. You want to move your properties into the land trust and then move the land trust over to the LLC. Voids taxes and also keeps your name off the public record when you're using that tool. Okay, land trust, very important tool for real estate investors. You need to keep that in your toolkit. Now, if you invest in California, if you live in California, Wyoming Statutory Trust, you got to become familiar with this. Okay, this is a key tool for people who invest in California or live in California. And what do I mean by that? If you live in California and you create LLCs, doesn't matter what type of LLC it is, it doesn't matter where that LLC is located. This could be an Ohio limited liability company. If you live in California and you're a member in an Ohio LLC, California will charge you $800 in franchise taxes because they say that LLC is doing business in California. Instead, if I lived in Ohio and I own California real estate in a California LLC, California is going to want $800 a year for this LLC. So for a lot of investors who live in California or invest in California, creating the types of structures that we've been talking about, I mean, even a series LLC. If you're a California resident and you own a series LLC, like I just showed you earlier, all of the cells and the LLC have to pay $800 each. So if you invested in Texas and you have 4 cells, then that's considered to be 5 entities. California wants $4,000 for that type of planning. Now, this, for many people, is an impediment to putting together the right types of structures because they can't justify spending $4,000 for their plan to maintain it. I talked to a gentleman a few months back that I was working with, and he lives in California, and he said to me, hey, I've got 3 properties in California, and I want to protect them. And I want to create one LLC for all 3 properties, like this. Now, you know what I'm going to say, right? Don't do it. We want 1 property per LLC. And I said, no, I would not do it that way. I would separate them out, and I would create 3 separate LLCs. Now, his response to me was, well, these 3 properties only represent 15% of my overall portfolio. So I don't mind putting them all at risk. Remember that mindset I talked about earlier about how we look at our assets? If you're investment real estate, if you own investment real estate, a lot of times people look at it from the value of the portfolio and not what it's doing for you. Meaning, my question to him is, I said, how much money do you make off your investment real estate? He gave me a number. I said, how much of that portfolio income is attributed to these 3 properties? You'd be surprised. It was 45%. I said, so you're willing to risk 45% of your annual investment income by putting these 3 assets into one structure. And his response to me was, yeah, but I don't want to pay the $800 a year per LLC. Now, quite frankly, sometimes when I hear that about California real estate, I'm just shocked because $800 versus the $30,000 you're bringing in rental income, that's pretty de minimis. I get it if you only generate $5,000 a year in rental income, $800, that's about almost 25 or 20% of that, but $30,000? But people, they all look at things differently. So I said to him, how about we do this? We'll avoid it completely. I can set you up in a way in which you can have the asset protection you're talking about that you need and not have to pay the $800. Like, how do you do that? And I said, we'll create 3 Wyoming statutory trusts. These are legal entities that are set up in Wyoming. They're a business trust. And we put each of your properties into one of these trusts. There's 0 franchise tax that needs to be paid. 0 tax that needs to be paid. He said, well, what about those LLCs out of state that I have where I'm being taxed on those from the state of California? Because I hate paying those taxes. I said, simple. What we'll do for your out of state stuff is I'm going to create another statutory trust. And I'm going to take all of your out of state LLCs that California's been hitting you $800 on. I'm going to put them into here. Now you'll no longer be subject to taxation on these as well. When we got done with our discussion, by utilizing this planning right here and this planning over here, there's about a $6,000 overall savings for a California investor in franchise taxes by using a statutory trust. There's a lot of people out there that structure investors all the time that don't know about this tool. I read on forums and they're saying, well, if you're in California, you should be setting up LLCs. No, if you don't want to pay the fee, you don't have to. There's another tool. Now, how do we know about the tools? Because we set them up, number one, but we also know what the tax code is. The revenue and tax code in California specifically exempts statutory trusts from paying the $800. So let's set it up. Pretty cool. So that's how we go about structuring. Those are some of the tools that we have, depending on where you're investing. There's other things. I don't have time to go into them. That's why we need to have a strategy session and talk about this, to analyze your portfolio, where you want to do your investing, because this is what I meant by it's not a one size fits all. But I will say this. I want you to understand that this is one level of the asset protection. Everything that I've been talking about to date with structuring your investment in real estate, it has one flaw in that. And that flaw in this overall planning is that if you just look at it as creating an LLC in your state or wherever the property is located, it's not enough. Okay. Meaning you can get your protection, right? If something goes wrong with the property, your assets are protected. Okay. So if I have LLC set up here and something happens with one of these properties, great. I'm protected. But a lot of lawsuits, I think we can agree, are not based on whether or not there's an actual harm that has been created. A lot of lawsuits are based on greed. That is, how much pain can I bring to bear on that individual to get them to meet my settlement demands? Because no one wants to go through a lawsuit, right? When I ask people, in an event, if we were live, we're live here, but I mean, if we were in an in-person event, and I say, give me a show of hands, how many people love being sued? You don't see any hands going up, right? Now, when you talk to people who've been sued, it's always the same thing. The emotional aspect, the cost of going through that lawsuit, how much I stood to lose, and what they were saying, and the falsehoods that they were leaving in the complaints. And I felt like that I was trapped to some extent, and it would never end. Well, we understand that stress. And what we tell people is, like, wouldn't it be better if you could be in a position where no one wants to sue you? I can make you look like that guy I was talking about that's on the street that jumps out in front of my truck and I run him over. Let's just say it's just the opposite. I'm parked at a stoplight and that guy on the street comes with a hammer and starts clobbering my truck with the hammer and dents it up and breaks the window. Do I sue that person? No. Why don't I sue him? Because he has no assets. What am I going to take? Oh, I want to get a recovery because I want to get that hammer from you. Oh, I see you have that blanket over there, that blanket and pillow that you use to sleep in the streets. Oh, I want to recover those as well. No. You look at that and you're pissed, but you don't go after and you sue that individual. So why? Because they have no assets. So when you're setting up structures, what's key, in our opinion, and what we look at versus the way a lot of other people do it, is I don't want you to even be considered a worthy target. How cool would it be if we could set you up with somebody runs an asset search and you're like, why do you want to sue that guy? He's not worth anything. Let's sue his neighbor. He's got all the assets because everything's in his own name. Well, it's so simple to do that once you understand how entities are set up. So when you set up an LLC, right, you have to have a name for that company. You have to have a registered agent for your LLC. You have to list a business address for the LLC. And you have to list either the manager or member. So this is the information that a state typically collects on an LLC when it's being formed. And there's a lot of individuals that work with attorneys that will set these companies up for them. And the name of the LLC is not relevant, but the client, so this would be you, will be their own registered agent. So their name is now associated to this company as a registered agent, and their home address is often put up there. They often use their personal address as a business address. And then they list themselves as the member or manager. So now you've got this LLC set up, and this LLC owns a rental property, and you have a disgruntled tenant. Even if you're not managing it yourself, you have a PM handling it, disgruntled tenant. They want to create chaos in someone's life. Who are they going to go after? They're going to go after the owner. How do I figure out who the owner is? I look up who owns the LLC, and your name's all over the place. I want to come out to your house and harass you. Well, they could do that as well because they know where you live because you put your address out there. This is real. I experienced it. My family did growing up because my father, hands-on property manager. And the tenants in one of it, we had some buildings. The tenants always knew when my dad was gone on a work trip because he worked for the federal government subcontractor on computers and stuff. And so he'd had to fly out every so often to program something on a ship. And so he'd be gone for a week or so at a time. And when he would leave, the tenants knew he was out of town because my dad used to stop by the properties every day on his way home from work just to check in. So they knew he was around. But when they didn't see him, it was really eerie that every time my dad would go out of town like that, after about 3 days being gone, start getting phone calls. My mom would get phone calls in the middle of the night, hanging up, or somebody heavy breathing, or I'm going to come get you. I know your husband's out of town. Why? Because they knew he wasn't around and they wanted to harass my mother and scare her. My mom used to sleep with a 38 on her nightstand. She would tell us kids, she says, you turn on the lights, and when you come down the hall, you make sure I know it's you. All right, don't come sneaking up on me and try to scare me, because we did like to scare my mom when I was a kid, any chance we got. But dad's out of town. There's no way I was going to scare her. But that's how easy it was. People could just figure out who the owner is. And in this day and age on social media, your character can be assassinated like that. They can start calling your employer and just start harassing you. And what's your defense, right? You can think, you say, oh, no, I never did that. That's not me. I'm not a slum landlord. It's already out there, right? And what are you going to sue them to take it down? Good luck at that. So when we're thinking about structures, what we like to do with our clients is we're not out there like a lot of investors who have these LLCs, and I'm sure a lot of people said they have LLCs right now that they've set up, and I'm guarantee you they're in your name. I can trace it back to you. Whereas the way we set things up for our clients and the way we do it ourselves is we don't have our name on them. You cannot